Good evening, America. I'm Amelia Davis, and tonight, we don't just report the news, we confront the truth. You're watching The System Failed, Truth versus System, where we dig deeper than headlines and challenge the stories others won't tell.
And I'm John Carter. Thank you for joining us. Together, we expose injustice, uncover deception, and bring light to the voices silenced by power. This isn't just news, it's accountability. Welcome to The System Failed, Truth versus System channel.
Our Today Uncover Truth News is the Pentagon Papers, how the government lied about war in 1959 to 1961. At the Rand Corporation, a think tank thick with Ivy League brilliance and Pentagon secrecy, Daniel Ellsberg was the man who always listened. Former Marine, Harvard PhD, he carried the aura of someone who had once stared into war and walked back with answers. But they never really looked at him. Certainly not the men in suits who briefed presidents. Not the generals who sent boys into jungles from 1,000 miles away. And especially not the secret architects of war who twisted truth into policy and buried it under top-secret stamps. No one suspected that the quiet one was about to shake the entire foundation of American power.
In 1969, in Santa Monica, California, the air hung heavy with the smell of sea salt and betrayal. Daniel sat in his office, alone, the lights dim. Before him lay the classified history of the Vietnam War, 7,000 pages, 47 volumes, a weapon more dangerous than any bullet, the Pentagon Papers. He had read every word, every lie. The government had known since the early 60s that the Vietnam War could not be won. Yet they kept sending troops, year after year, administration after administration. Ellsberg remembered the faces of boys he had seen die in Vietnam, boys who had trusted their country to tell them the truth. He remembered the mothers at Arlington Cemetery, standing over fresh graves while politicians made promises under marble columns. He couldn't be quiet anymore. He told no one, not his wife, not his children, not even his closest friends. He began sneaking papers out of the office, one briefcase at a time. Night after night, he and a friend photocopied the documents in a small, borrowed office. His hands shook as each page slid across the machine, each clank of the copier like a heartbeat of treason. Or was it patriotism? He wasn't sure anymore. He was breaking the law. He would be branded a traitor. He could go to prison for the rest of his life. But he had seen the truth. And silence, he knew now, was complicity.
In 1971, in the New York Times, Daniel sat across from Neil Sheehan, a journalist with a knack for explosive truth. "This will destroy your life," Neil warned, holding the documents. Daniel nodded. "If it saves even one, it's worth it." On June 13, 1971, the New York Times published its first installment of the Pentagon Papers. The headline screamed across the front page like a gunshot. Vietnam Archive. Pentagon study traces 3 decades of growing U.S. involvement. The country exploded. The Nixon administration panicked. President Nixon didn't care about Vietnam lies. He cared about the precedent. If Ellsberg could leak this, someone else could leak anything. "We can't let him get away with it," Nixon snapped in the Oval Office. "We have to ruin him." The full force of the federal government was unleashed on Daniel Ellsberg. FBI surveillance, CIA wiretaps, Nixon's plumbers, a secret unit that would later break into Watergate, broke into Ellsberg's psychiatrist's office to find dirt to smear him with. They indicted him on 12 felony counts. He faced 115 years in prison. The courtroom was packed. Flashbulbs exploded like fireworks. Protesters chanted outside. Inside, Daniel stood like a statue, every movement watched, every word dissected. Prosecutors called him reckless, disloyal, dangerous. He betrayed the trust of the American people, the government argued. But the irony bit deep. The truth Ellsberg had revealed was that the government had already betrayed that trust, long before he had. His defense was clear. "I didn't leak secrets. I leaked lies." But justice, he knew, wasn't always served in the courts.
Then came the twist no one expected. The same men who hunted Ellsberg had gone too far. The break-in at his psychiatrist's office was illegal. The White House had ordered it. The judge, stunned by the misconduct, dismissed the case. Daniel Ellsberg, enemy of the state, whistleblower of the century, walked out of court a free man. The powerful had tried to destroy the underdog, but in the end, it was their own corruption that unraveled the machine. The Pentagon Papers changed everything. Public trust in the government collapsed. The war lost even more support. Congress began limiting presidential war powers. A year later, the Watergate scandal began to boil, sparked by the very same plumbers unit Nixon had used against Ellsberg. Daniel had been the first crack in the dam. Now the flood had begun. But for Daniel, the victory came at a price. He became a pariah in some circles, threatened, watched, hounded. Still, he held his head high. "I was willing to go to prison," he said, "to stop the killing." Years later, long after Nixon had resigned in disgrace and the Vietnam War had ended in ashes, Daniel received a letter. It was unsigned. No return address, just one line of type. "You stopped one war, but what if you missed the next one?" Inside the envelope was a single page, classified, red-stamped, and recent. It referenced a new covert operation, buried in bureaucratic language, but Ellsberg's gut turned cold. The same machinery, the same pattern. Another secret war, another generation in danger. Daniel Ellsberg, now an old man, stared out his window. He thought he was done. But the truth, it seemed, had one more fight left in it. The letter stayed on Daniel Ellsberg's desk for 3 days. It was quiet in his modest California home. Too quiet. No reporters, no FBI. Just the weight of silence and memory. But that one line kept echoing in his head. "You stopped one war, but what if you missed the next one?" He didn't sleep that night. At dawn, he made black coffee, opened his safe, and pulled out the original envelope. The document was short, just a single page, but it stank of something rotten. At the top secret, eyes only, Umbra clearance. And below, vague language he recognized all too well. Field testing of region-specific tactical response systems authorized under Directive Black Flag. Trials to commence Q4, full denial protocol enabled. It was 2023. Ellsberg had retired, but war, real war, never seemed to sleep. Daniel knew the phrases. He had written many himself when he worked with the Pentagon. Tactical response systems often meant chemical weapons. Field testing usually meant testing on people. And denial protocol meant they could cover it up however they wanted. He called no one. Not yet. Instead, he flew to Washington, D.C., this time not as a whistleblower, but as a ghost. A gray mist hung low over the Potomac. Ellsberg, trenchcoat tight against his body, walked with slow purpose toward the Library of Congress. He wasn't there for books. He was meeting an old contact, someone who still owed him a favor. Inside the dim halls, tucked between dusty shelves of government archives, a tall, anxious man in a navy coat stepped from the shadows. "Dan," he said, voice tight, "you should have burned that document." "You read it?" The man nodded. "You don't know what you've walked into." "Then tell me," Daniel said, "before more blood gets spilled." What he learned was worse than he feared. In 2003, a secret program called Black Flag had been quietly developed under the pretense of anti-terrorism defense. But by 2020, it had morphed into something else entirely. Not about defense, but about control.
According to declassified minutes hidden inside the Defense Appropriations Act, the Pentagon had authorized research into neurological disruption technologies, weapons designed not to kill but to pacify populations, chemicals that could dampen aggression, induce apathy, or manipulate fear. Regions of interest? Not just foreign. Urban centers in the U.S. had been used as behavioral testing zones since 2018. No announcements, no permission. Just clouds released after dark. Just patterns noticed too late. Ellsberg sat in a small cafe in Georgetown, staring into his coffee. His hands trembled, not from age, but from rage. "I swore I'd never stop fighting," he muttered. "But this is worse than Vietnam. At least then we knew it was a war." He pulled out his notebook and began mapping out the names. Generals, labs, shell companies, contractors, politicians. And then the questions. Who authorized this? Who else knew? Where are the documents? He knew one thing. This had to be exposed. But this time, he wouldn't just leak documents, he would go live. Daniel reached out to a new generation, young, idealistic journalists from independent outlets, Truthline, Deep Leak, and Fourth Watch. They met in basements, in garages, and in encrypted Zoom rooms. Ellsberg shared everything: scans of the document, audio files of whistleblowers, satellite images of known test zones. The goal? One truth. One day. Everything revealed. But someone was already watching. 3 days before the broadcast, a black SUV followed one of the journalists home. Her apartment was ransacked, laptops gone, cloud backups deleted. Ellsberg received an email from an anonymous address. You were lucky once, that's rare. Don't push it again, old man. Daniel's breath caught. It wasn't just government secrecy anymore.
There were people, powerful, faceless people, who had built careers, empires, and weapons on silence. They wouldn't just let this go. On the morning of the broadcast, Ellsberg prepared to step in front of the camera. The young producers were giddy. We'll stream on 5 mirror sites, one said. It'll be uncensorable. He took his seat, lights on, microphones hot. But 10 minutes before the stream, one of the journalists, Lena, received a phone call. She stepped outside, her face pale. When she returned, she was shaking. Dan, she whispered, they have my brother. Military base, classified orders. If we go through with this. Her voice broke. Daniel looked at her, at the fear, at the trap, and he made a decision. He nodded slowly. We won't do it, he said, loud enough for the others to hear. The crew fell silent, confused, angry. Are you serious? One shouted. You're backing out now? Daniel didn't answer. He calmly packed the hard drives into a bag. That night, no stream went live. The documents were returned to his safe. He told no one where they were going next. But the betrayal was already in motion. 3 nights later, a fire broke out in Ellsberg's storage unit. The blaze destroyed everything. The servers, the notes, the audio files, even the original letter. The fire chief said it was an electrical spark. Daniel knew better. Someone had buried the truth again. 2 months later, as Daniel sat quietly on his porch with a worn copy of the Constitution in his lap, a package arrived. Brown paper, no return address. Inside was a USB drive and a note. We saved a copy. If you're reading this, then we've already started. The truth never dies. He plugged it in. The drive opened to a folder labeled Black Flag Phase 2, and just beneath it, another folder. Civilian Trial Run. Operation Winter Dusk commences at 4, target, DC Metro System. Daniel's face drained of color. They weren't testing anymore. They were activating. The truth is just beginning to surface. We've only scratched the surface of how the government lied about war and what Daniel Ellsberg risked to expose it.
What do you think happens next? Drop your theories in the comments below. Part 2 drops soon. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss it. Your support helps us bring more stories the system tried to bury. Please subscribe. We love you. Thank you for watching.